Today we're going to talk about virtual environments. So in Python, whenever you're developing, especially if you want to start using third-party modules that you download, it's a good idea, best practice, to create a virtual environment for the given project, right? So these virtual environments are kind of self-contained versions of all the packages that you need to use for the particular project that you're working on. So it may seem a little abstract, but we'll see that in action. So the reason why you would want to do that is because if you just download, all the different third-party modules and everything else that you need over time, and you download those, to be used globally on your computer, then eventually you're going to have it. At first everything is going to be fine, probably, but eventually you're going to start running into issues where you have 2 or 3 different versions of the same module because you've downloaded it multiple times, or there's a conflict with another module, or some other module is using another module as a dependency. So you didn't directly download it, but now there are conflicts. So things can just get complicated, and you might end up having to just delete everything and start all over. So in order to avoid all this headache, we're going to try to keep things nice and clean and disposable and isolated. So we'll use virtual environments. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that actually means, how to do it. So the way you do it is we'll be doing this over and over again. We develop, especially in Django, coming soon. But we will run a simple command. So Python -m flag. Let me make this a little bigger. Python -m venv. So what we're doing here is we're calling Python, which we do all the time. -m flag basically says we want to run a module from the command line. So instead of having a file where we import and everything and then run something, we're just going to we want to use this module directly on the command line. And that module is called venv. So this is a built-in, again, Python has a very rich standard library. So we can just go ahead and use Python's built-in. There are other virtual environment tools that you can use, but this one works very well. So if you're very interested in the topic, feel free to explore other options, but this is the kind of standard that we're going to be using. So Python -m venv, and then you can give it whatever name you want. So what Python will do, or what the venv module will do, is create a folder, and that folder is going to have a bunch of other folders. So it's very similar to what we've seen when we create a node project, where we do npm init or even git init. So git init will create a folder with a bunch of files in it, right? So you just run one command and it creates everything that it needs to get you up and running. So we'll go ahead and do that. And since we're going to be talking about SQL, I'll just call this SQL env, but you can call this whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. So SQL. It'll take a second. And we can see up here, now we have a new file. So if I do ls, now we have this new file, SQL venv. If we can go in here and take a look at what's inside. So there's a whole bunch of things. We have a binary, include, lib, and this is going to have scripts. You don't really need to, you basically never need to go into here. I'm just describing what's in here just for the sake of doing it, but you basically will never have to go in here. Kind of like node modules, right? So bin will actually run, here's an activate script. So you can take a look at this. This is a bash script that will be used when we do activate our environment, which we'll do in just a second. We can go into the lib here. We haven't really installed anything, so there's not going to be much here. This is just the basics that venv needs to run. Okay, so there's not a whole lot going on here in here just yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate our environment. So if we just start, installing things now, nothing's going to happen. It's still going to install in the global environment. So what we have to do is we have to tell Python now, okay, we've created this virtual environment, basically this folder, and now we want to start using it. So we want you to pretend that, to some extent, the rest of our computer doesn't exist. We only care about what's going on here. So to do that, you do source, and then the name of your virtual environment, that folder, which is sqlvenv, and then bind and activate, which is this script right here. So you're saying run the script. So you can go ahead and run that. And now if your bash profile is set up correctly, you'll see this thing. So this is telling us now we're operating in this virtual environment. So now we're kind of isolated from the rest of our computer. So if we download stuff, we can download it, and if we have a problem, we just delete the folder, we delete this virtual environment folder, and we can start all over. No hassle, no problems. We don't have to start digging around in our system. Okay, so just to, and so this is activating. So create it as Python -m venv and then the name that you want to give it. And then to activate it, to actually start using it, it's source, the name of your virtual environment, /bind/activate. Okay, so now we're here, we're using it. Let's go ahead and let's say we want to get out of this environment and kind of return to our normal system. So the term or the command for that is deactivate. Whoops, I misspelled it. Trying to talk and type at the same time. So deactivate. So now notice that this parentheses went away and we're back in our normal environment. So just to show you, this may not be believable maybe. So just to show you that we are in fact in different environments, that we have access to different things. Let's go ahead and, so we use pip to install things. Pip does a couple other things. So one thing we do is something called pip freeze. And this is going to tell us all of the modules that are available to us. So on my machine, on my local machine in the global environment, I have this. And your list may be something like that, but if you have 30 things here, you might want to rethink what you're doing. So you should just have a, kind of the bare minimum here in your global environment. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll return to, we don't need to, we've already created our environment. It's right here. So we don't need to recreate it. We just need to activate it again. So let's go ahead and do that. Source, sqlvenv, bind. I don't know if it's bind or bin. I think it's binaries, but in any case, I'll call it bin or bind, whatever I'm calling it. So source, SQL, env, whatever that name is, bind, activate. Now we're back in our virtual environment. And what happens if we run pip freeze? We got nothing because we haven't installed anything yet. So in our global environment, we've got some things. In our virtual environment, we haven't installed anything yet. We have nothing. So let's go ahead and install something. So we're going to be using shortly scicop as a way to interact with database. So we'll use Python as kind of a wrapper to execute SQL. So let's go ahead and install that. So we're inside, it's important to note we are now inside of our virtual environment. It's activated. So now we can start installing things. And our global environment won't be affected. So pip install sycopg2. I think that's what it is. A lot of random letters here. Okay, so it's going to go hopefully install everything. Okay, so it looks like that worked. We can try running pip freeze again just to see what our, okay, so now we have something. So we've installed a new module and now we have it in our local environment. And if we can go into the folder here and we can see that it's shown up here. And just like the node modules, what we've done is we've just downloaded the code. So someone else wrote this code, right? Someone else wrote just a bunch of files and folders, put it on GitHub or wherever, and on PyPy, whatever repository, and made it available for us to use, and then we can download it. So we download that code into our environment, and now we can use it. We can look at all of the folders. We can look at the source code here. So I just want to point out that, again, you should never really have to do this for practical purposes when you're doing this stuff, but just to let you know that this is what's happening and maybe demystify things a little bit. So this particular file, this pool.py, this is for Psycop G2. They're currently developing Psycop G3. And again, this is just FYI, not important or anything. But I'll just link here. So here's, if you go to the page, so recently, one of the most recent blog posts is about designing a connection pool for Psycop G3. So here we can look at the one that's currently in use is version 2, and you can actually look at that code right here. So if I'm not saying you should come here to try to understand how Psycop G works. That is not that's not something you should do, but it might be good just to kind of scan through and see what this is. Real source code that's used by millions of people. So this is professional quality. It works. It's been well tested. So it might be good just to take a look at how they build things. So we can see here that, for example, they're using they're indicating that a given method should be treated as private. So there are all kinds of things. Notice the use of doc strings and comments. So something like this can be useful, and then you can also, if you happen to be interested in connection pools, this is someone has to build this, right? So he actually talks about looking around in other projects and examining other things, so trying to get ideas for what's a good way to redesign this thing. So it just gives you some insight into how code like this actually gets written. Again, this is more advanced than we need, but I think it's interesting. All right, so let's go back to our virtual environment. So let's go ahead, let's see. Let's just double check that we can actually use that. So Psycop G2. Okay, so we'll save that. And if this actually is available to us, we should be able to run this. So, okay, so we don't get an error. So Python, the interpreter, is able to resolve this. So we are, in fact, using it. Now let's go ahead and just double check. Let's deactivate. Let's exit our virtual environment. So deact. Okay, and let's try running that code again. And it fails. So no module named Psycop G2, because if I run again, I can check out what's available in my environment here. So pip freeze. I do not have Psycop G2. So that's kind of the long and short of virtual environments.